Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is calling for clarity about the immigration crackdown in the Twin Cities. In a letter to DHS on Friday, Omar says witnesses have documented blatant racial profiling and an egregious level of unnecessary force by ICE agents during Operation Metro Surge. President Donald Trump continues to target Omar, calling her and other Somalis, quote, garbage, and accusing her of attaining U.S. citizenship illegally. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar represents 700,000 Minnesotans in Minneapolis and the West Metro suburbs. She won her last election a year ago by 50 percentage points. And the Congresswoman joins us right now. Thank you very much for coming in.
Good to be with you, Esme.
All right. I do want to ask, first of all, how are you, and what is it like being the focus of a president's ire repeatedly over and over again?
I am doing all right. And it is really disturbing and creepy to have the President of the United States be obsessed with you and those who share your ethnicity. I know that he is deflecting from the failures of his presidency. He rather scapegoat us than answer for why people can't afford their lives, why he has not fulfilled his promise of creating a more affordable America. He doesn't want to answer for the possible war crimes of shooting down those boats in the Caribbean. He does not want any conversations about releasing the Epstein files. He wants to continue to protect pedophiles. And he certainly doesn't want to answer for why soybean farmers are struggling here under the weight of not just tariffs, but the fact that he bailed out Argentina to the tune of $40 billion. And so what does he do when he doesn't want to really answer the questions about the failures of his administration? He cues the bigotry. And we know this playbook.
Well, this has been going on. Well, there's a history there that goes back to the first term, but this latest incident or series of incidents has been about 2 weeks. And Jean, your staffer, was telling me in the past 2 weeks, there has been a flood of phone calls into your office. And I want you to tell me about the majority of those calls.
Yeah, the majority of those calls are of people who are lending their support, telling us that they disagree and mortified about what the president has had to say, not just about me, but about Somalis here in Minnesota and in this country, who are their neighbors and fellow classmates and fellow co-workers. But they also tell us to continue fighting because it does set an example when you stand up to bullies. And there's so many young people who are watching us who want that representation that says you're not going to bully us from doing the work that we're supposed to do.
Well, the president does have the proverbial bully pulpit, being the president, and he has continued to say and accuse you of attaining U.S. citizenship illegally. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows I came to the United States at the age of 12. Gained my citizenship at the age of 17, and I am an elected representative in the House of Congress, and so the House of Representatives in Congress. And so for me, you know, I look at it as a display of his ignorance, and I see it as a national embarrassment that he continues to say those kind of things, even though he does know what the truth is.
One of the things that the president keeps talking about, and others have talked about it here, is the degree of fraud in some Medicaid programs here in Minnesota, which obviously is taking away from people who really need the money. A disproportionate amount of the people who have been convicted so far are Somali. What do you say to that, and the fact that the entire community is getting blamed for this?
Yeah, I mean, here in the United States, we don't blame the crimes of an individual on a whole community. We are, as Minnesotans, also outraged the fact that our tax dollars were defrauded. And as somebody who deeply cares about these sort of social safety net programs, I'm deeply hurt that we had fellow Minnesotans who thought it was okay not only to take that money away from vulnerable people that needed it, but also jeopardize the future of these programs.
Right. One of the things the president is also targeting is that they want to do several investigations to see whether any of the money that Somalians send home, which they have for years, via money transfer businesses, if any of that has gone to a terror group called Al-Shabaab that has murdered many, many Somali citizens. The suggestion the president seems to make is that Somalis are hand in hand with Al-Shabaab. Do you want to clear that up? And what do you think about looking to see if anything is getting to Al-Shabaab?
Yeah, I mean, Somalis here in Minnesota have been in the forefront of fighting against the terror that is Al-Shabaab and the destruction that it has caused in Somalia. Many of us have family members that still live in Somalia. Many of us have friends and people that we grew up with. We are deeply worried every single time that there is a terrorist attack that somebody we know might have gotten hurt. And so if there is here and there to this accusation that some of the money might have gone to support Al-Shabaab, we do want our government to get to the bottom of that, because we also spend a lot of time and resources as Americans fighting Al-Shabaab. Our government is very much involved in helping the Somali government fight Al-Shabaab.
All right, and one of the things that's going on for years is that the banking industry really isn't set up in Somalia, and that these money service businesses are the way people give money. But I want to ask also about fearing something else, because I read that there was a raid on a restaurant and a young man was arrested, and it's a restaurant that your 20-year-old son frequents, and you got very concerned. Tell us about that, because the fear comes home for mothers, whether they're members of Congress or not.
Yeah, I mean, it was last Friday. Typically my son goes to Friday prayers with his friends, and then they all go and eat at their favorite restaurant in Cedar Riverside. And I knew, I saw videos earlier in the day from Representative Mahmoud Noor and others that the ICE agents were in Cedar. And so I kept calling to see,
Calling him,
yes,
your
calling
son.
my son to see if he was okay, if he had any run-ins with him. And he wasn't answering. And eventually that night I did get a chance to talk to him, and I had to remind him just how worried I am, because all of these areas that they're talking about are areas where he could possibly find himself in, and they are racially profiling. They are looking for young men who look Somali that they think are undocumented. My son was born here, so was the young man that they harassed. And he did say, they did come into the masjid while he was there praying. They didn't do anything.
They came into the mosque.
Yes, and they left. And then, yes, he did see them at the restaurant. They just walked around and kind of left. But yesterday, after he made a stop at a Target, he did get pulled over by ICE agents, and once he was able to produce his passport ID, they did let him go.
So your son went to Target last night with his passport.
He always carries it with him.
In case he gets pulled over.
Yes.
Which he did by ICE.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're glad that he's okay, and we're very glad to see you. Thank you to your husband, to Jean, also for coming in. We appreciate it in the cold.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you for having me.
All right. Absolutely.